There is a feeling that you get when you're in a store and you see something and you think, I would love that. I'd love to wear that. That would look great on me. And then actually being able to pick that item up and realize that not only can you afford it, but actually I can afford the top as well, or I can afford that bag. And I think that's where in Europe for a long time, we've had that, oh my God, I got this from Primark, £12, €12. It comes from that feeling and you want to share that feeling with others. So that's something we recognize for a long time. And we've been very clear that we want to continue to replicate that wherever we go.
Welcome to Retail Remix. If you've done any shopping in Europe, then you've probably come across a Primark. It's a retailer whose name precedes it around the world, and when you finally have the chance to visit, it doesn't disappoint. But until recently, it was widely unknown in the U.S. That all changed 10 years ago when Primark opened its first American store in Boston, fitting for an Irish brand. Since then, the company has been slowly but steadily making a name for itself stateside. And my guest today, Kevin Tulip, is a big part of that. Kevin has come up the ranks of the business, from a store manager in England to leading the company's Benelux group and now driving its entry and expansion across the U.S. He's going to take us inside Primark's American ambitions and share how the brand is changing the game when it comes to value-conscious fashion. Welcome, everyone, to Retail Remix. I'm your host, Nicole Silberstein, Editor-in-Chief of Retail Touchpoints, and I have with me today Kevin Tulip, President of Primark U.S. Thanks for spending some time with us today, Kevin.
Thanks for having me on, Nicole.
So since Primark entered the U.S. in 2015, the company has been on a very steady growth trajectory. So tell us a bit about where the U.S. business stands today and what plans you have for growth going forward.
Yeah, I think 10 years has gone over quite quickly, I must say. But we started with one store in 2015 in our home city here in Boston with our downtown Crossing store. And actually the first few years, we really spent quite a lot of time testing and trialing. So an initial 10 stores in the Northeast. But actually, since then, we've been really starting to branch further out. And actually, we've recently just opened our 31st store in Memphis, Tennessee, which was our first store in the state. I guess the decision for Primark to come to the US was a lot bigger than it had been for sort of other countries that we've gone into. Being based in Europe, of course, moving into some of the other European markets in some ways was easier and simpler to do. Whereas for the US, it took time in terms of the build up for it. And then, as I said, some of that testing and trialing in those first crucial years.
Yeah, we are a finicky crowd, us Americans, right? We're a little different from the Europeans. This is so, you've been at Primark for 20 years. You've worked for the company all over the world, but in Europe. Tell me a little bit more about the differences or how you had to shift the strategy for the U.S. customer and for the U.S. market.
Yeah, and as you said, I think, 24 years now this year I'll celebrate, which
wow.
Again feels like it's gone over really quickly. But a lot of my time in the business has seen us really growing across Europe. And as we've grown across Europe, of course, we've sort of started to expand and become a much more global business. And that really was where those first sort of steps came in around our US ambition. But when we think about sort of the 10 years that we've had, I think the first few years were certainly around, let's see our product offer, how does that resonate with the customers in the Northeast? And there's so much from culture to climate, of course, that is different, that actually getting set up in the Northeast was one thing, but then really starting to branch further out from Northeast has been something else entirely. I think what we saw very early on was that Primark's offer of amazing product at amazing price, being able to offer consumers this fashion, this trend, but the price and the affordability was certainly unique. And we saw that in the Northeast. And then as we've continued to grow and open more stores, we've seen that continue to resonate. And obviously the continued learnings then has really been around climate. I mean, we opened a store recently there in Memphis where it was 96 degrees outside, quite different than, of course, it is in Europe. So there's been lots of learnings that we've continued to get into from a product perspective.
Are you having to then approach the U.S. business almost in the way you do with Europe, but where like you are approaching each region differently? Just because, as you say, like the Southwest is so different, even from a climate perspective, from the Northeast of the U.S., it's almost like two different European countries. Do you find that you're having to take a very regional approach then to your U.S. store strategy?
So the power of Primark really is that we are geared up as a global business to deliver that incredible price. And of course, by doing that, we want to be a lean business. We want to make sure that we're passing on that value to our customers. So to do that, we have one global product range and we all feed in. We all have a seat at the table. And I must say the US business, as we continue to grow and open more stores, we have an even stronger voice in that room on that table. So that's the first thing that we try and stick to. There, of course, then are the regional differences that we've continued to work on. And, my team here work exceptionally close with our buying, design and merchandising teams in Dublin to really talk around what are the needs and what are the different climates and what is the product offer then city to city and state to state. I think obviously the caveat to that is we've got to continuously come back and say, if we want to be a price leader, we need to be a cost leader as well. And we need to make sure that what we do is keeping the business lean. The other thing I'd say on that is we actually give our store leadership teams quite a bit of autonomy on pulling product rather than it just being pushed. So although it's one global range, the store leadership team in a certain area can then tailor that global range to their customer base. So, as we think about, let's say December last year, we'd opened our first store in Texas in McAllen, where it was 85 degrees in McAllen as we were open in December, and I don't remember what it was in Boston, but I'm sure it was closer to
not
zero.
80, yeah, not 85.
Not 80,
that's for sure.
Definitely not 85. So of course you're trying to then make sure that you've got that global range, and actually then the store leadership team are able to pull what they need. And really that's around giving the autonomy, the trust, but also us and me spending plenty of time in the stores with the team, making sure that we're learning those lessons and having those conversations.
Now, I'm based in the New York area, so I am eagerly awaiting the opening of the new NYC flagship in Herald Square. Can you tell me anything, give me any kind of news about when I'm going to be able to get there?
Well, what I would say is we are exceptionally busy right now preparing for that store opening. So
Good.
We have got a number of stores to open. We've got 16 leases that we've signed and publicly announced. Herald Square is one of them, but I must say it is going to be an exciting one. It's a flagship store in the heart of Manhattan, right near sort of Penn Station. I mean, the volume of foot traffic that we've got around there is just incredible. I think as it is with any sort of major city across the world, when we opened in London and of course when we continue to expand through Europe, there's just huge excitement from internal and external, and this has been no different. So we're going to be opening on 55,000 square foot of retail selling space across 4 floors. And unfortunately, I can't give too much else away at the minute because we are hard at work with the plans. But what I would say is that I think, if anyone knows Primark who's going to be shopping there, they're going to be seriously blown away by that in-store experience. And if you don't know Primark and you walk in there, I think it's going to be unlike anything else that you've seen in retail in the US.
Okay, so that's actually a great lead in to my next question, which is that Primark's name really does precede it, especially in Europe. I feel like even before I had ever had a chance to visit a Primark, my first Primark was also in London. Very exciting moment when I finally got to go to one, but I had heard about it before. I'm not sure, though, in the US that it's a very, a well-known brand, or at least before you entered 10 years ago, that it was something that everyday consumers were really aware of because it was so focused on Europe. So as you entered the US, how did you introduce yourself to American customers and let them know what Primark was, but also what made it different from some of the other kind of value fashion incumbent competitors that are already established in the US?
True, and you're absolutely right, Nicole. I think, look, if you stop anyone in Europe in the street and ask about Primark, they'll tell you who we are, where we're based, what we do, and probably talk about our prices. And quite often you'll get a very proud moment of, I picked this up in Primark, €12, £12. You'll get that absolute pride that people will talk about in terms of getting a great deal. When we started in the US in 2015, we brought all of that. We set up immediately in Boston with our full range that we've offered in Europe. And actually, we've only continued to sort of double down on that, being very clearly driven from a price perspective around we want to be absolutely outstanding value. I think the difference and where we've continued to offer something unique is that it's not just about the price, it's actually really up-to-date fashion trends, and you're also getting incredible quality. And I think when you then bring those three things together is where you get the level of uniqueness. So we might be a similar price point to some off-price retailers, but actually you're not buying last season's product here. You're buying something that's absolutely on trend this season. And as I said, I think from a quality perspective, sometimes there's a bit of a mismatch for people in terms of price v quality. But I think what we've seen is in the US, as consumers have tried Primark, we're getting such a great repeat customer there from buying our clothing, wearing it, and just having that great feeling of like, this was $12. Can you believe it? And actually, it feels great. I look great, and it washes great. And that's sort of where we want to continue to build. And there's lots of that that's word of mouth, which is great. And, the only challenge with that, of course, is that word of mouth takes time.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of, because price is so crucial to the Primark, name and what people love about it, you briefly touched on the kind of centralized nature of your product design and sourcing. Tell us a little bit more about that. Our audience is retail insiders, so they want to hear the details. And I find it really interesting, particularly because you've continued to keep that centralized even as you continue to expand internationally, right? So talk a little bit about the strategy behind that and how it helps with not just price, but like speed to market, sustainability, some of these other things that are really important to the Primark brand.
Yeah, I think we've been in business since 1969. And as we've continued to grow, certainly the one big part of our business that we've continued to stay true to has really been around keeping things lean and keeping things simple. And ultimately that's done to deliver that price to our customers. Everything from sort of how we design and produce centrally, but also how we operate our stores, how we operate different countries within Primark. There's constantly the view of, is this the simplest way? Is this the most efficient way for us to be able to operate our business? At the same time, I think, people might then think, then these guys are just obsessed with productivity. And of course, productivity is important to us, but actually we're far more focused on people, on our team, on hiring great talent in and having the right level of trust and autonomy for people to make decisions locally. And that's how we sort of look at being productive and keeping things lean. We don't, invest in expensive hangers and expensive tags. So there's all of that type of product design that we keep simple. And even as we think about sort of building our stores, we are a bricks and mortar retailer. How we design our stores, how we operate our stores, there's constant work going on around how do we make that as efficient and as simple as it can be. So it's never a done job. It's something that really lives within our culture, but constantly it's about how do we then make sure that that value is being pushed back to the customer. And whether you're in Milan, Italy, having a conversation with Luca, who leads our Italian business, or in the US with me, we'd both be approaching it with the same business model.
And no matter the country, the product offer is the same, whether it's Italy or whether it's the US, every Primark is pulling from the same kind of centralized product pool. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So, we have that one global range. Now, there are some slight deviations to it. So one example in the US is we've worked with the NBA and NFL, and we've created some local sports. So, one thing that we wanted to do is one of our real sort of values is around being good neighbors and showing up and being local. And we do that through, giving the local team autonomy to be able to pull product. But also we want, customers in Buffalo who shop with us in Walton Galleria to be able to buy incredible Buffalo Bills products. And believe you me, it needs to be Bills. There's no other team that's of any interest in Buffalo. We've discovered, so it's about having that great product. And again, it's the fantastic price, it's the quality, it's the fashionability, but it's that local team. So there are some areas, you can't walk into a store in the UK and buy the Buffalo Bills product. We've done that for the US. It's very rare that we do that. It's not something that we do across the business. I think if we tried, that would very quickly become expensive and we'd lose some of that edge that we've got on price. But actually, the US is a very important market for us. And we actually saw this great opportunity, particularly working with NBA, NFL, and other great license partners to be able to do this. Where we do have great power is, as another example, our US consumer loves Disney product. So we're actually able to then, it's the same product, but actually in terms of the volumes and the depth of the buy, we're able to change that for the US business and make sure that we're then satisfying that request from our customers here.
Retailers are entering a new era, one powered by AI and filled with opportunity. But they shouldn't have to go it alone. Meet Commerce, the new parent brand uniting BigCommerce, Feedonomics, and MakeSwift into one AI-driven ecosystem, connecting all the tools your business needs to adapt faster, scale smarter, and grow with confidence. Commerce's powerful selling solutions help brands turn data into discovery, create storefronts without bottlenecks, and build frictionless shopping experiences that your customers will love. Want to learn more? See how Commerce is powering what's next at commerce.com/retailremix.
Now, I want to talk to you about sustainability because Primark is very active and vocal on that front with a number of goals and programs around material sourcing, emissions, product repair. Investments in sustainability at this scale are somewhat unusual for a brand on the value end of the pricing equation, at least in America. So I wonder first if you can just tell us a little bit about the company's philosophy around all of that and how you afford to do it and still keep prices low.
Yeah, I'm with Primark 24 years now, and for at least the last 15 years, there's been some incredible work that's been happening in Primark. And I think the trying to do the investment now, I can imagine would be incredibly sizable. But actually, we've been doing a lot of work and building relationships and partnerships for a long time now. And I remember having a very small centralized team who were working on sustainability almost 2 decades ago now. And of course, that team has continued to grow. But in reality, it's always been focused on, in the countries where we produce, working with local partners, being really clear around what do we believe is the right thing to do, and having the right people at the table to help deliver that. So whether that's around building up our durability framework, because having great quality clothing that lasts is incredibly important to us. Yes, it's price and it's fashion, but we also want that product to be loved and for you to wear that for as long as you want to wear it. We're well on our way now. I think we're on well over 65% of our product now is made of recycled or more sustainably sourced materials. That's continued to increase year on year. We've had some big leaps on that in the last couple of years, particularly. And I was quite fortunate enough myself to actually be able to do a trip over to India to actually meet quite a number of people involved in our supply chain before COVID, which I have to say has not only a business impact on you, but quite a personal impact when you're meeting people in factories and suppliers who've also, by the way, been working with Primark for decades in some cases. And you're actually talking about the developments that they've got on and sharing ideas. It's incredible. And that's sort of how Primark's continued to build. And it's the company that I've been able to grow up in. So I think rather than it being a heavy investment sort of now, it's really been something that's continued to be built for the last 15 years.
Very interesting. I do want to hear a little bit more specifically about the repair workshops, because you've just expanded those to the U.S. And again, this is something that in the U.S., we've really seen primarily only for higher priced items. It's not typically, you don't typically think about repairing something that cost you $10. So how are you making customers aware of this offering, but also more importantly, kind of getting them to use it?
The repair workshops we'd launched in a couple of our European countries a few years ago now, around 2022, and they've been incredibly successful. I mean, just very, very popular. And in some countries, I think that's maybe more top of mind and people maybe, had it more of a thing that they wanted to do, but just incredibly popular. So for the US business, we'd already been talking about it for a while that we wanted to launch it. From our perspective, we had, and I think I mentioned earlier on, sort of, being good neighbors is something that's very important to us. It's sort of part and parcel of who we are. So we actually saw this as an opportunity to engage with customers, both who are shopping at Primark or maybe new customers, but actually also delivering on that sort of being good neighbors and starting to maybe do some more reach out programs. So we did our first repair workshops, Love It for Longer, quite recently. And the first one was in Staten Island in New York. Very, very successful, very popular, great feedback from customers who joined it, but also from our colleagues in the store. I mean, it's certainly something different that's happening day to day for the team in the store as well. So we'd actually put it out to all of our stores to say, hey, who else would like to have one of these? Who else would like to get involved? And we very quickly saw a number of stores say this would be really something that we'd like to get involved in as well. So for us, whether you've spent $10 on the jeans or $180 on the jeans, we believe that it's something that you should continue to love and wear. And your knowledge of how to repair that is just simply part of buying and owning fashion.
As you're speaking, it just strikes me that so much of Primark's approach feels like something out of the world of luxury. So like this focus on durability, on quality, on offering repair services to, increase the life cycle of the product. There's other elements too. You don't do online sales at all, right? And you also have a policy of no discounting. That also still feels very luxury. And yet you are a value priced fashion brand. So tell us a little bit more about the reasoning behind some of those strategies, like not doing any online sales, not offering discounting or promotions, which many of your competitors do, and how that works out for the brand.
I feel like the synergy between the two is really around pride in terms of what you're buying. And I think what we've believed for a long time is that there is a feeling that you get when you're in a store and you see something and you think, I would love that. I'd love to wear that. That would look great on me. And then actually being able to pick that item up and realize that not only can you afford it, but actually I can afford the top as well, or I can afford that bag. So that whole feeling, that whole interaction that you have, the experience of seeing it, trying it on, loving it, but actually it being something that you can afford to do, just is this incredible moment of pride. And I think that's where in Europe for a long time, we've had that, oh my God, I got this from Primark, £12, €12. It comes from that feeling and you want to share that feeling with others. So that's something we recognize for a long time. And we've been very clear that we want to continue to replicate that wherever we go. To sort of be able to, I guess, continue to do that has meant that we've obviously needed to really think about just setting the business up to be able to deliver that on in every country that we go into.
So I guess, especially in a country as diverse, as spread out as America, marketing is crucial. I'm wondering, with everything happening in that world, there's just a lot of fragmentation, a lot of competition. There's ongoing concerns about what's going to happen with TikTok, but also excitement about how impactful TikTok can be. There's so much happening in the marketing landscape here in the U.S. What has been your strategy for marketing in this country, and how are you connecting with U.S. consumers today, especially as you enter new states and new regions?
Yeah, so we are a lean business and we're constantly thinking about, costs. So for us, it's around how do we engage with consumers, and we use our social media channels a lot for this. So we've put a lot of time over many years into building up our social media following. So for a business that doesn't have a transactional website, we actually have an incredible following on our social media channels. And we use that to reach people. We celebrate everything from new product launches to new store openings on there and everything in between. As we've grown across the US, we've built up a plan, a playbook around how do we sort of, from the very moment that we start recruitment in that area, how do we sort of get out there as a brand? How do we give some visibility? And we have, more recently, we introduced our first US brand campaign last year in New York, which was our That's So Primark campaign. And that was really the first time in the US that we've actually gone out and done sort of a big brand campaign. Outside of that, it's been largely about brand building through word of mouth, through our store openings, and making sure that, as I said, as we're trying to reach customers and build brand awareness, that we're doing it in the Primark way, which is simple, lean, making sure that we're sort of trying to meet customers where they are. And we've seen it be successful. I think, the great success that I've seen is as we've opened stores in New York is a good example of this. We went from the first store opening in New York under my tenure, we had, I think, 200, 300 people in the line outside before we opened. We opened City Point in Brooklyn to almost 1,000 people outside in that line waiting for us to open. And again, just doing, quite social media driven, using very local influencers. But that word of mouth has been exceptionally strong and has continued where we've had density of stores. Where it gets more challenging, of course, is where we open stores in new states or remote cities as the first stores. And that's where we're continuing to really strategize around that as we continue to grow throughout the US.
So what's on the docket now for Primark in the coming months? I imagine in this current environment, you're actually very well positioned. All we keep hearing is how consumers are looking for value everywhere. And that's you're right in the middle of all of that. As you're looking at holiday, what do you have on the docket?
Yeah, I think that search for value and that want for value, I think is always there. And there's always those moments where of course it feels like it's more important and more of a priority, but I think it's always there. And as we think about sort of gearing up for back to school, it's always an important part for us. I think families are always looking for that value, and certainly this year will be no different. So we're really gearing up for, what products do we have for back to school for families. We've got a lot of new stores to open. So of course, we just entered into Tennessee with our first store in Memphis. We've got a number of new stores coming between now and the end of the holidays. So we'll be opening our second store in Tennessee at Franklin at Cool Springs Galleria, as well as our second store in Texas, in El Paso. So lots of store openings going on over the next couple of weeks and months as well. And then actually we've got some incredible product coming in for the holiday season. So certainly lots to look forward to there, particularly working with our licensed partners for some big launches of products as we get into the holidays this year.
What's really lovely is Herald Square at Christmas time. And it would be so wonderful if I could do some holiday shopping at the Primark there.
I will just take a small note, Nicole, of that request.
All right. So now to wrap things up, we have our mixtape rapid fire question. Just some quick, fun questions to round out the interview. You ready for those?
Yeah. Hit me.
Okay. What is the most favorite item that you own from Primark?
My favorite item is a double-breasted suit that I bought actually in 2019. It's a herringbone check, beautiful suit. Love the fit of it. I've worn it for many store openings. Continue to wear it and love it forever. But it's definitely one of my favorite items I've ever bought.
Yeah. I still have the shirt that I bought on my first trip to, which was probably a decade, maybe even more ago. I still have it, still love it.
Great to hear.
A brand, and it can't be Primark, that you think is really getting it right in the US?
Abercrombie and Fitch, I think, has done an incredible job and transformation. I think certainly many in the retail space have probably looked on in awe as they've transformed the business. And I think a great job, lots of inspiration there that we've seen in the last year or two.
Because you have worked and lived all around the world, I'm curious what your favorite country in the world is to visit.
So it's a bit of a cheat one, this one, but of course it is actually the US. And now that I live here, I get to really explore. So I am in the process of ticking off national parks and trying to get to as many states as I can. So I think I'm on 29 states that I've visited so far. Some of it obviously through work, of course, with new store openings, but we're really pushing, my husband and I, to also get out and visit as much of the country as possible.
What's been your favorite national park so far?
So far, I loved Yosemite. Was definitely my favorite so far. But we're planning a big trip to Yellowstone next year as well. So Yellowstone's always been on my to-do list since I was a kid and saw a nature documentary when I was young. So that's a big one that we're gearing up for next year.
But have you done the Grand Canyon?
No, actually not yet. Oh. So I have been to Vegas.
Oh,
but
you
not
have so much ahead of you.
Yet. Lots still to tick off.
Yeah. An item that you own and will repair endlessly rather than ever replace it with a new version.
A really old satchel bag, which makes me sound very English in this moment. But I have sort of an old satchel bag that I love and I use it quite frequently. It's in my closet. And as that continues to break down over the years, that will be something that I will constantly be trying to repair and continue to use.
Now, we've established that you love America, but as a European, what is your biggest pet peeve about life in America?
So the biggest pet peeve is probably the weather, and nobody is to blame for this. We are a massive country, but packing for trips around the US is so difficult. I had a trip, and I'm out in stores every week, but I had a trip last winter where I needed to be in Chicago early in the week and then Florida by the end of the week. And I had everything with me in that small suitcase, from coats to knitwear to thick sock to a pair of shorts. So it is so difficult when you're traveling around the US to make sure that you've got the right layers of clothing in your suitcase.
Good thing you work for a fashion retailer, right?
Exactly. That's what I always think. If I don't have it in my case, at least I work for a great fashion retailer.
Just pick it up at the store. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for being here today and bringing a little bit of European flair to our American-based podcast, and also for bringing Primark to the US, because it's fantastic.
An absolute pleasure, Nicole. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you also for listening. We would love to continue the conversation with all of you on LinkedIn on the Retail Touchpoints page. Stop by and share your favorite Primark moments and let us know what other Vanguard brands you want to hear from in future episodes. Talk to you all soon. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Retail Remix. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. Until next time, keep mixing it up.